Hi, this is Patrick Young with the Frontier Financier, the Future of Finance podcast, sponsored by Cinnober. I'm delighted to be here today with John McDonnell. He's the CEO of Bitnet. He's been an amazing figure in the rise of Bitcoin to date. Very, very interesting because, of course, John, actually, in some ways, I mean, you had a startup, you were then with Visa, and now you're back in the free world.
Yeah, that's right. I guess it's something it's in the blood, you know, and it's tough to eradicate, you know, from your system. Once you have that future vision, sometimes it's tough in a big company context to execute on the ideas you come up with. So creative destruction, there are a lot of pithy phrases to kind of capture the sentiment. Call of the wild, flight instinct, you know, greed and avarice play a role, I'm sure, in the decision.
So all human emotion is in there, just like markets, effectively. Yeah, that's exactly where we are. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about your involvement at the moment. You're running Bitnet. What's the position? What exactly are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder and chief executive officer. I'm based in San Francisco. I spend a lot of time in our other offices now in Asia and a few in Europe. And mostly I focus my time on developing the ecosystem, okay, finding distribution channels, engaging with partners who can help to resell or refer us merchants. And so a quick description of what we do. Ultimately, we enable retailers, primarily online retailers, to accept Bitcoin as payment for goods and services. Something that we concluded while at Visa. As you mentioned, Visa acquired CyberSource, where my co-founder, Stephen McNamara, and most of our employees come from CyberSource. We realized that as the internet propelled online commerce in a borderless fashion, that payments had not kept pace. And what we saw with Bitcoin was the ability to fix a significant and growing problem, not just with the ability to enact or complete transactions cross-border, but to control the fraud, okay, and control a lot of the difficulty that retailers experience in trying to accept payments. Bitcoin seemed to be a tectonic shift forward, okay, in the ability to use the internet, okay. So for the first time, we had money over IP. So in the same fashion we can send email and send ideas, we can now send money, which is great.
I love that phrase. You just used it in the panel session here at Tech Open Air a moment ago. I must say, I'm going to be using that myself. Money over IP, I think that's a very, very important point we've reached in the internet. And therefore, how do you see that going forward? I mean, do you think Bitcoin adoption, cryptocurrency adoption, is going to be a global payments issue or more regional?
Well, I think initially it'll proliferate regionally, and I think that emerging markets are probably the regions that are the best poised to take advantage of a lot of the benefits of Bitcoin adoption. I think that probably initially the remittance channels, okay, will fuel that. A significant component of the GDP in some of these emerging economies come from immigrants sending money back to their families and friends. So people are getting Bitcoin, and I think one of the data points to look for are the proliferation of ATMs in a lot of these markets. I think that's a sign that people need to convert the Bitcoin they're receiving over the internet back into their local sovereign currency, into fiat currency. And that's happening, it looks like, predominantly in emerging markets. Some of that could also be due to the relaxed regulatory stance that these markets are taking, the regulators, I should say, in these markets, and for good reason. I think that their constituencies, right, their citizens, they're more concerned about the costs of remittances than they really are about a lot of first world issues, frankly, like counter-terrorist financing. And the Bank Secrecy Act and the U.S. Patriot Act and the long arm of the IRS through FATCA and a lot of these considerations that are really hampering the growth of Bitcoin in developed economies are really a secondary concern to some of these emerging markets.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very much about the base core of commerce, isn't it? I mean, they're trying to get the money around, they're trying to get the money to people. And you look at the cost of remittances, which has been, frankly, a scandal in the Western world for anybody who's trying to get their money back to the Philippines or Africa or somewhere like that. Right. Very, very interesting. So where do you see, therefore, the overall cryptocurrency world going in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I think that remittances are going to be play a big role in that, just the P2P transfers. I do think in the developed world, it probably will be B2B to solve a lot of the same issues, okay? The cost, the complexities, the latency of sending money through correspondent banks over wires and SWIFT and other existing bank networks can be eliminated, okay? So I think B2B is probably the leading story for the developed economies. And I think, as a B2B to C, as a payment type that consumers are going to use to spend, to buy goods and services. I think generally what we've seen is enabling global retailers to reach these emerging markets is probably the initial story there. The initial application is to enable the 5-6 billion people with mobile phones but no bank account for the first time really to be able to join the online commerce revolution.
And of course that's going to be a very interesting thing also in the greater, wider and investment world, because ultimately those people are going to use their phones for other transactions as well. John McDonnell, it's been absolutely a pleasure to have you with us today. We hope to have you again on the Frontier Financier podcast in the future, bringing you the Future of Markets, sponsored by Cinnober. Thank you very much, John McDonnell.
Great. Thank you very much, Patrick. Pleasure.